So, my question is, how does the creative process differ from person to person, and how may a person go about improving their creative process and creative health? There are lots of different sides to this question that I was asking myself and thinking about throughout the creation of this assignment. It ended up leading me to more questions, let's call them sub-questions, which helped me find some good research points for coming closer to answering the main question. The first sub-question being, as someone whose thoughts, especially creative thoughts, seem to be so distant from me, how can someone practice being more conscious of their thoughts throughout their process? Sub-question number 2, how many other artists are mentally affected by their craft and bothered by restrictions and hang-ups of their craft or process? Sub-question 3, is everyone's creative process very different, or does the human mind have a basic way for thought that every person shares? So, for my research portion, I split it up into sections. The greater two sections would be of the book titled The Creative Process, written by Brewster Gilson, and the 21 surveys I had passed out. With my question, I saw that it was most important to gather information straight from the source, and from a real person and a real artist, rather than a person who lacks creative and artistic understanding. The surveys I passed out have 6 questions, each question about the creative process and how the individual is affected by their art form, whether good or bad. Many of the surveys, people were willing to fill them out with fleshed out answers, but for the next time, I will avoid passing them out 5 minutes before class starts to get the most genuine answers I can. So for the first question, it was describe what the creative process looks like for one of your art forms, represent it visually, or write about it. Do you have any restrictions? For example, can only paint well under pressure for time, can only write or create late at night. For the second question, does your creative process or the way that you create restrict you? If so, does it affect your mental health or your will to create? Question number 3, do you have any techniques or practices to improve your creative being or streamline your creative process? Ways to work around your creative restrictions? Question number 4, do you go out of your way to create in new ways and go outside of your artistic comfort zone? Question number 5, is your art form something you would like to make a career out of or even incorporate into your work in some way or another? The last question, question number 6, do you feel like you create your art yourself, controlling your thoughts and decisions for your artwork, or do you feel like the ideas just come to you, whether from the outside world or subconscious, and you have to apply them? Gathering your information, it seems that all the surveys people's creative processes are very different, some people really wanting to plan out their writing and plan out their characters, and others who begin choreographing a dance by finding a song as the very first step. Referencing survey card number 9 and number 4. There's lots of variation in the way people said they created. I tried to give surveys to each of the majors and split it up as equally as I can. It's clear that different majors would have very different processes for creating. Dance very usually would start with a song, as would I, myself. Writers may start by putting down whatever is in their head, whether they know it's the final piece or not. And then music majors, writing music might be more so of a process of them either practicing sheet music or writing their own and playing around with modes and progressions. It truly is different from person to person. As a small side note, 10 of 21 artists taking the survey said they want to make a career out of the arts that they create. Even at a school like Langley Fine Arts, it's pretty surprising that not that many people would like to go into a career based off of their art form. It seems to be more of a hobby type thing. The second larger section of this project was the parts of the book, The Creative Process, that I read. It studied different artists and different mathematicians. I decided to focus on the fine arts creators though. I read into Van Gogh and Picasso. Van Gogh had lots of troubles trying to understand why he was, quote, doomed to remain idle, whose heart is eaten out by anguish of work. He struggles with a creative rut, feeling like he has nothing else of purpose for him to do. He feels there's so much more out there to create, but he feels he's not able to create it. This sounds awfully like he's having an art block. Obviously, it's more than just that. Van Gogh struggles with a lot of mental health issues, but it's on some degree comparable. When an artist has an artistic block, especially a very committed artist, they lose that outlet to feel satisfaction by completion of a piece of art or improving your skills. The artist at that point, if assumed to only have the talent or work just in art, then of course they'd feel very useless. One very simple way of helping improve your creative health is to have other hobbies that you can feel a sense of satisfaction by doing. That hobby acts as a backup, so when you're having an artistic block, you can remove yourself completely and work on another part of your brain. Relaxing while having an artistic block can be a struggle. It's not easy to distract from the frustration. It's very crucial to consume all forms of art, whether beautiful or not. You can easily learn from something you'd not like to create, teaching you what not to do, what to avoid, because you're able to see what bad art does look like. That is the most basic form of learning in art. For the next portion, I'll be showing a video of my creative process and the art I gathered as practice to become more aware of my creative process. The idea is that the exercise can help me control when I'm feeling inspired and get closer to a place where I can switch the pure, inspired creation on and off. This acts as an example of how an artist could overview their creative process. Within my creative process, it's very spontaneous. I avoid planning as much as I can because what comes out when I do not plan I like a lot better than what comes out of me when I keep track of things. My fault in that is that I feel like I'm not in control of my creative thought. When in my conscious brain I attempt to create, it does not have the same magical spontaneous feel of the subconscious creativity. I collected a small group of drawings I made a point of making to show what the spontaneous nature of my creation looks like. Analyzing one's own creative process can help you realize more of what your subconscious creative thoughts are. Through this, I have improved on my conscious creation. Instead of having to sit around and wait for inspiration, I've sat down and forced myself to create. Even just for a short 10 minutes, for 8 days, some days I created more, some days I created less. Some of the art is connected in theme. I tried to draw the first thing I thought of to keep the spontaneity of it. The main idea of me doing this is to train my brain to understand that at some point in the day I will have to sit down and create. That's where the idea of repetition comes in. That's why you'd like to do this every day. If you do it for long enough, you can get to a point where your creative self is just a mode that you can switch on and off. When you have trained your mind to remember that you're going to creatively think or execute art every day for a bit, then you won't have to sit around and wait for inspiration. By the end of this, I realized I was able to create without frustration, but with little fear of frustration and messing up something I'd liked. For the last part of this, I did another exercise just like the last one where I sat down and created as spontaneously as I could, recorded it, sped it up to show how I create. This was to see how easily I could create once again, but have visual evidence to show what my spontaneous creation looked like before days after practicing daily. I did 4 drawings. Each drawing I really had to force myself into, to start even the first line. For a couple of them, I started with a little silhouette, planned sketch, maybe with the camera on me, or the idea that I'd have to show this to people put me under a little stress, so I went to plan it out, which is out of my nature. When casually creating, I never feel I need to make a plan layout. I like to keep it spontaneous. The characters themselves were not planned. Still on camera, before each drawing, I had to sit and think a little about what I might draw. For the very first one, I did not like the idea or the silhouette, so I dropped it very fast and moved on. The second and third drawings went very smoothly, but what was different from any other time I create is that I felt very self-conscious, as I was more conscious of my creative thought. Within my conscious, there seems to be more doubt than within my subconscious. But the fact that I was more consciously aware of the creative choices I was making, so I could better control how my art was to turn out, could not even be because of the practices that I did of reminding my brain I will create once a day. But it could also be because of the pressure of a camera on you, or even the pressure of time. Whatever specifics it was, it felt like stress, but it was very much to my benefit. The idea is to grow away from this stress so that there's less self-judgment when creating art. It helped me guide the creation while still keeping it something of my standard quality. It's never been that creating from the subconscious brain is bad, but only been that a lot of artists that feel they have to sit and wait for inspiration or a wave of creativity to come to them is something that is up to the mental health and wellness of the creative mind. Rely completely on being given creative thought by your subconscious mind is not something reliable, and any artist that hopes to make a career should try their best to practice moving away from reliance on waves of inspiration that show up at your doorstep. You are the artist. The art does not guide you as much as you can guide the art. Throughout this capstone project, I have not reached an exact final answer, but found little ways in everyday life that you can help improve your creative process. Like most things in life, there's no easy way to get out of things. Whether or not anything represented in this presentation is newfound knowledge, it still has its worth in that it encourages people to push forward with their art, even if it just means 10 to 15 minutes of practice every day. All it takes is a little initiative on the artist's part. And then at that point, you're proving you're really dedicated to your craft.